we're going to talk about Yom Kippur, the observance of, and how to celebrate it. And then the Coinfish verse from Matthew 17:27, and how that's going to tie into the 153 fishes that we talked about a few weeks back. All right, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you have to go back and watch the video. It's the Hair Portal 153 fish video, a few videos back. And to my mind, it was revolutionary. Um, it was a great explanation of the 153 fishes. I've heard it several different ways explained. Just staying in the Word and using the Bible as the tool to decode it seems to fit best. Um, I equated it to, and many others, kind of, instead of the right and left brain hemisphere, right? Stay on the right side, like your creative thinking. Your right brain has something to do with your connection to God, like it's the God side of your brain. It's the side that believes. But even though all that stuff sounds really, really accurate and it's really clever, but we can't take stuff that's outside the Bible to decode the Bible. We find it within the Bible. It's very similar to that, and that has a lot to do with it. And I don't mean to rain on anybody's parade. I even thought that for the longest time, but diving deep into the Bible and then also, searching out other theologians and putting all that stuff together, come to find out that it makes more sense, it being the right and left hand of God. And what that breaks down to is the eternal promises versus the temporal promises, right? When we focus on the eternal promises, those other promises seem to be taken care of. And I'll get into that a little later. I didn't mean to even spoil that now, but it's fun to talk about. Anywho, nobody watched the videos from last week. Go back and watch them. These last couple videos have been pretty dang good, man. Starting off with the Hair Bridge 153 fish video. Some good stuff there. In the last video, we observed the eclipse that's going on over there. Last week it was going on over there. And then also the video before that we talked about I'm sorry. 2 weeks ago was the eclipse over there in Israel. And then it was a partial eclipse. I even saw it over here in America. And I live over here in New Mexico, and I pointed it out to a buddy of mine, which is kind of unique. And then last week I talked about the meteorite that's seen all throughout the world, right? And broke down the etymology of the meteorite name. It's a Chinese name, Mandarin name. It breaks down to copper, right? Copper mountain, once you break it down. And it's kind of, that's kind of monumental in the deciphering of the occult world, right? Exposing the evil, how they love the whole copper allegory, and they utilize it every chance that they can get, because that's synonymous with the copper serpent and they utilize all the biblical significances of copper, and they utilize it in their stories and their media and their movies, their music. And I kind of briefly go over that. I've broken all that stuff down many, many times before. Not going to get into it again. But if you're keeping up with the videos, which there's at least a couple people that are watching them, and I'm pretty sure it's the same people, which is, I'm hoping so they'll understand this video, or at least the videos that I come out with. But yeah, it breaks down this Copper Mountain. I even said that, whenever a worldwide meteorite is visible, it's usually a warning for the world, right? So that something's going to happen. And I use the example of the vid. Um, Before that happened, the vid 19. Before that happened, there was that comet Atlas, which is ironically, the name Atlas is attached to this Japanese or to this Chinese comet name, um, which is very unique. But I kind of associate it more along the lines of probably something to do with war. And then lo and behold, the whole attack from Iran and Israel. And I know a lot of people who are not familiar with that kind of stuff. Oh, it's just some Middle Eastern scrimmages that they always go through. But it's not. That's actually, it's usually with the proxy, the proxy militant groups over there. Iran is its own country, and that's monumental because now that's possibly going to turn into something deeper and darker. Um, and that's actually found in a lot of prophecies in Scripture. It's bound to happen, whether it happens now or happens later. It will happen because it's in Scripture, it's in the Bible. But I find it very ironic that right after that, that meteorite, it's still here. It'll be here. It'll be visible through all October. So it's probably something to look forward to. I mean, not look forward to, but to pay attention to. Um, I just find it very coincidental that it happened right after that last video, and that's it's like two for two now. Um, but at the same time, I'm not proud of that either. Like I'm not boasting or anything like that. It's a tragedy, and hopefully nobody died. I don't think there was reported any deaths. Just a lot of bombs were dropped. But usually, they're not going to report one or two deaths. Only mass death they usually report on. But at the same time, it's just like this stuff's starting to get crazy. It's not about being prophetic. It's just about people like me and others out there call this stuff out all the time, but it goes unnoticed. Meaning that God and the Bible does say that there are reasons for these signs in the sky. Um, don't ask for a sign, because that's forbidden throughout the Bible. A wicked and adulterous generations ask for a sign, but these signs are God's handiwork, His clockwork. Um, we just observe Him. That's it. We don't take any kind of significant meaning to any astrological sign, any kind of meteoroid, none of that stuff. We're just clearly observing them, and that's it. Um, and then recognizing patterns that are attached to these signs. That's all it is. It's nothing about being prophetic. It's just, and I don't deem myself and or my peers as being prophets, which it's not, it's not completely exemplified from the Bible. In the end times, people will prophesy. Um, but at the same time, that's not what's going on here. Me, I'm just observing stuff. Pareidolia. I'm observing patterns. So you can go back and watch worldwide comets and asteroids, and you can draw connections to worldwide catastrophes that are connected to them. Happens every single time. It's putting this stuff together. That's all it is. And these are some very interesting times, and we should be paying attention to everything that the Bible tells us to. We should be, we should have our guard up, of course, discerning everything, including me, including you. Anywho, let's get into this decode. It's a very short chapter, and I really don't have much on it. I'm sure I wouldn't say there's not much in the chapter, but because God is so infinitely wise, and there's so much in every single chapter, every verse, every syllable, every word, every number, all that stuff. But I only captured a couple things myself, so let's decode this best we can. All right, Exodus 11, 1. And the Lord said unto Moses, Yet will I bring one plague more upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. Afterwards he will let you go hence. When he shall let you go, he shall surely thrust you out hence altogether. So the dilemma here where we left off is that Pharaoh's not letting all the people go at once. That's where we left off. He was just going to just let go the men. But that's not the deal, right? That's not freedom, to go sacrifice to the Lord, and probably even expects them to come back. And God and Moses are not having it. So God's going to release this last plague, and hopefully that releases the Israelites or the Hebrews from the clutches of Pharaoh. And where we left off too is the parallel of this chapter, or of this story of Moses, almost to the parallel of end times. And other denominations, other religions have, or I would say continue religions of Christianity have also equated this, and also other Christian theologians, who think outside the box have put this stuff together too. But I brought up like how you can see the parallels of the plagues paralleling minutely, or not even minutely, just paralleling to a certain degree in Revelation. You have the hail mixed with fire, mingled fire. That phenomena, you've never seen it. I've never seen it, right? It only happened this time, Moses' time, and it'll happen in the end, right? So there's a bridge. Same thing with the locusts. Even though they're little tiny locusts, that ate up all the green thing, you have the locusts from the pit that are not allowed to touch a green thing, which was a cool parallel, by the way. And that whole opposite effect, and you'll see the opposite effect again, the oppositing parallel happen again in this chapter. You see darkness, like in the Mosaic times, it was the 3 days of darkness. In Revelation, there's just moments and periods of darkness. But the Catholics took it to the umpteenth degree, and they believe that it'll be another 3 days of darkness towards the end, which the Bible doesn't signify that or state that anywhere in Revelation. So we just got to be, honest with ourselves. And I get it, and I appreciate that kind of thought, right? Especially decoding this stuff and connecting parallels. You appreciate that kind of stuff, but to actually teach that stuff to people, like, be ready for it for generations. I wouldn't say it's a false doctrine. It's just radicalizing when it comes to that kind of stuff. There's other reasons why Catholicism and other denominations and other religions that are connected to the King James could possibly be false teachings, but I'm not going to get into that. Just to keep it simple, is that the Bible clearly shows the Hebrews, the Jews, right, and the Old Testament, and then New Testament. Clearly, there's only one type of Christian, and Christians actually found in the Bible, but Catholicism isn't, or any of the sub-denominations, subcategories of Christians are not. Just keep it Christian. People who love Christ. We don't have to change anything. So yeah. Speak now. Okay, 11:2. Speak now to the ears of the people. Let every man borrow of his neighbor, and every woman of her neighbor, jewels of silver and jewels of gold. We've briefly talked about this in a few chapters back. I believe it was in chapter 3. And kind of decoded it. So we're going to recap of what I think this may be possibly paralleling to, right? Just for the allegory parallels. That's all we're doing on this. We're not guaranteeing this stuff's going to happen in sequence perfectly. No. Just allegorically paralleling. Um, so let's get into this verse. All right. The problem here is the wording as well. So speak now into the ears of the people, and let every man borrow of his neighbor. What does that mean? To borrow from, right? And every woman of her neighbor jewels of silver, jewels of gold. And right here, this is where it gets kind of confusing. And the Lord gave people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and the sight of the people. So, what does that mean? So, let's get into this. All right, so I went over all the commentary. So, why are they borrowing from their neighbor? What does that mean? Why? This was the best commentary that I could find that explains it. So, Benson commentary, and all I did is just go to the Bible Hub and have Exodus 11:2 explain. So, if you ever have problems decoding or understanding certain Bible verses, just get other people's commentaries, put them together, and see how it resonates with your heart. Because also, too, that the Bible speaks to us all differently, but the same. you know, the letters and lines that we read are the same. The message is the same, but sometimes certain areas of the Bible resonate with somebody a little bit more than the others because of that timing in your life, what you need to go through, what you need to overcome, what you need to understand. Okay, so it's good to get a collective understanding sometimes, um, and it's also good to just follow your own heart. Remember, when we're in the Word, we're literally with God, and God's going to talk to us, not all exactly the same. Okay, Exodus 11:2, Benson commentary, let every man ask not to borrow of his neighbor. The Israelites, who at first lived distinctly by themselves, when they were greatly multiplied, Pharaoh began to cast a jealous eye upon them, and to take cruel counsels against them, were more mixed with the Egyptians, as appears from Exodus 12:12 to 13, and many other passages. And this either by their own choice, that they might receive protection and sustenance from them, or rather by Pharaoh's design, who placed many of his own people among them to watch and chastise them. And we got that in the beginning of the first couple chapters of Exodus. Exodus 1:12, and perhaps remove some of them from Goshen to the parts adjoining, which were inhabited by people, jewels of silver or vessels, as the Hebrew word shili proper signifies, for they might plausibly ask, and the Egyptians would more readily give them vessels, which might be both proper and useful for their sacrifices and feasts, than jewels, for which they had neither present need nor use. This was the last day of their servitude, when they were to go away, and their masters, who had abused them in their work, would now have defrauded them of their wages, and have sent them away empty. And the poor Israelites were so fond of liberty that themselves would have been satisfied with that without pay. But he that excuseth righteousness and judgment for the oppressed, provided that the labor should not lose their hire. God ordered them to demand it now, at their departure, in vessels of silver and vessels of gold to prepare, for which God had now made the Egyptians as willing to part with them upon any terms, as before the Egyptians had made them willing to go upon any terms. All right, so it's rightful due. Um, and I believe in the last commentary that we read about this verse, but it was in, I believe, chapter 3, Exodus 3. That commentary broke down to, it was like a custom for anybody who's like moving away, or anybody who's like just like a slave, right? and Deuteronomy, and Numbers and Lamentations and all that stuff. There's clear examples of how we should treat a slave, and then in their departure, you must give them something. You must give them, you know, so you must shower them with some kind of, like, jewels or money or whatever, and that's just the custom to treat your slave. And the same thing applies here. You can see um, God is using that same customary departure with the Jews. And to me, that sounds like a parallel too, as well. So the parallel that I'm thinking of is this: when remember, like, the whole Mosaic story is the story of the end times, right? Jesus comes back and he's releasing us from the clutches of the dark forces of Satan in the end times, right? What's the need for all these plagues and all that stuff? It's, it's the reason for that is because the clutches are strong and to show God's power, right? So people will know God is God. If you just thrust one random thing at somebody and just end the whole thing, people will chop that up as some kind of scientific event, you know? But there are many layers of reasons why. But the fact is, it reminds me of this particular verse, Revelation 22:12. And behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according as his work shall be. So there's this common theme amongst theologians and Christians that when God returns, he's going to reward us, right? With our crowns, with, the precious stones, all that stuff. Um, and you can kind of see that rewarding through the Egyptians, that parallel, just for the allegory over here in Exodus. All right. Exodus 11:4. And Moses said, thus saith the Lord, about midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sitteth upon his throne, even unto the firstborn of the maidservant that is behind the mill, and all the firstborn of the beasts. This was another one of those verses, and how I brought up a minute ago, how the opposite affects the verses. So what I'm saying is, this is, to me, it sounds like another parallel. Of course it does, right? Let me explain this to you. So in Matthew 24:41, two women shall be grinding at the mill, one shall be taken, the other left. But it's like the opposite, because hopefully, this is alluding to a rapture type scenario, which goes in complete sequence with Revelation 4-7. And to be technical, it's actually 5-7. But you can, because Revelation 4 is describing what's going on in the heavens, and then 5-7 is the quote unquote tribulation period. All right, so two women shall be grinding at the mill, and one shall be taken. So right here, you have the same mill, right? And the maid servant. So you have the female connected to the mill, and all the firstborns of the beast. I just found that very coincidental. Um, I think that's a clear parallel, and it's the opposite effect, right? And you see that throughout the Bible. Like, the first will be last, last will be first, stuff, that kind of stuff. And you see this, and just like with the locusts, right? You have the old time locusts eating up all the green things, and you have the new locusts that don't even touch the green things. They're actually touching the men, right? They're torturing people. I just found it very coincidental. All right. Exodus 11:6, and there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as there none like it, nor shall be like it any more. But against any of the children of Israel shall not a dog move his tongue, against man or beast, that ye may know how the Lord doth put a difference between Egyptians and Israel. And I talked about this last week, and I equated that to being God's people and the rest of the world. Okay. Exodus 11:8, and all these thy servants shall come down unto me and bow down themselves unto me, saying, Get thee out, and all the people that follow thee. And after that I will go out. And he went out from Pharaoh in a great anger. And the Lord said unto Moses, Pharaoh shall not hearken unto you, that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. And Moses and Aaron did all these wonders before Pharaoh. And the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, so that he would not let the children of Israel go out of his land. And right here in Exodus 11:9, that was the wonders I was referring to, right? So here's another explanation of why God does this stuff. And I spoke of just a little while ago, if he only did one thing, and got all the Hebrews, the Israelites out of the land, if he just killed everybody or something, people would just take that as some kind of natural phenomenon that happened. But if you lay siege after siege and you defy nature, you defy the laws of physics, you defy all that stuff, it's irrefutable. It's irrefutable. It's you see God displaying his power over and over and over, not just these one-hit wonders. And that's we're suffering from that nowadays, right? When we see an act of God, God even explains that the signs are clearly for the Israelites. So us Gentiles are looking for signs or seeing signs. If when we see these miraculous acts of something, whatever, we chop that up to, okay, it's like, first we were like, oh man, it's an act of God, right? God did this, God saved that person. Then over time, just that one act starts playing tricks on you. You're like, maybe it wasn't God, maybe it was just coincidence, maybe it was just a freak accident or a freak something, and you start talking yourself out of God starts eliminating, or being excluded from the picture. But when you see things over and over and over that you can explain, that are being foretold to you, that you can't argue with that. And that's what I believe God is doing. He's multiplying his wonders, and it makes a great story to tell your kids and their kids and their kids. If it was just one act, it doesn't make a great story. Nobody's going to learn from it. Nobody's going to pay attention to it. Nobody's going to believe it. If that makes any sense to you. All right, that's pretty much it of the chapter. It was a good little chapter, though, huh? All right, so I guess we'll go to the Coinfish. Right. Okay, let me try to get you some context of what's going on. um, Basically, Jesus and the apostles have to pay taxes, right? So they need some kind of money to be paying taxes. They have to get it from somewhere, even though Jesus is living the faithful walk and, drawing on what God gives, exercising that invisible muscle of faith. But just like Jesus said, we are living in the land that's currently, because of the appointed time, not God's. I mean, of course it is, but, due to the appointed time that, evil has dominion here. And we'll get into all that, I think, next week, of why, of how and why El Diablo has dominion here. And sorry, not next week, the following week, because next week is the Day of Atonement, and I will not be doing a video, I don't think. Maybe the day before, I don't know. It's the solemn day of fasting, right? Water and food. And I'll get into that in a little bit too. So maybe the following week. And I think if I do put out something next week, it's just going to be on the Feast of Tabernacles. Just a quick observance of that. So we have an idea of what to observe the following week. So we have these 3 feasts, one after another, which is kind of cool. Yeah, so render to what Caesar's is Caesar's, render to God's what's God's. Okay, that's what we're dealing with here. Here's some context. And when they were come to Capernaum, they that received tribute money came to Peter and said, Doth not your master pay tribute? He said, Yes. And when he was come into the house, Jesus prevented him, saying, What thinkest thou, Simon? Of whom do the kings of the earth take custom to tribute? Of their own children or strangers? Peter said unto him, Of strangers. Jesus said unto him, Then are the children free. Notwithstanding, lest we should offend them, go thou to the sea and cast a hook, and take up a fish that first come up. When thou hast opened up his mouth, thou shalt find a piece of money, that take and give unto them for me and thee. All right? So they're paying tribute, not to offend them. At the same time, it's the same reason why we pay our taxes over here, right? It's more than offense. It's legalities. And so we kind of get a reflection of that right here. So this is the way Jesus pays his taxes, right? One could be like, so Peter goes fishing and finds a coin in the fish's mouth. And it sounds crazy, right? It sounds like what the heck? Well, what does this mean? But if you go back to the 153 fishes and how I explained it earlier in this video, what the whole fish thing represents, right? And I guess I'll touch on that right now. Sorry. We'll go to John. This is what we kind of went over last week. And in Matthew 17:27, Jesus sent Peter to go fish. In the fish's mouth was a coin. The fish equals temporal promises, right? Temporal food. He's physically fishing for fish. Peter is unique for his connection to fishing. Remember in John, like what this chapter signifies, which we went over, that John was the centralized figure. Not John, I'm sorry. Peter was the centralized figure in this chapter of John, right? Because he was fishing, him and the other apostles. And remember the first thing that Jesus told them, not the first thing, but one of the things, the major things, the most important things, he said, to what? Feed my sheep. Okay? And Jesus told him to, remember in the beginning of John, or in the beginning of the Gospels, Jesus chose Simon Peter for the specific reason for catching men, right? It was synonymous with this whole, there's this fish aspect that's connected to Peter, right? He's supposed to be fishing for men now, not fishing for literal fish, right? So fishing for men, believing on Jesus, is eternal promises. Fishing for literal fish is temporal promises. Okay, Peter and others in John 21:7, where we're at, we're fishing for temporal fish, as the Lord appeared to them and asked them for meat. And then also, Peter again was ironically charged to feed his sheep. Peter and the others were not doing the Lord's work. They were falling back to temporal things of this world. They were fishing. They weren't fishing for men. They were fishing for fish. That's the reason why they couldn't catch any fish. Jesus, the eternal meat, the eternal fish, already had fish. Do you notice that? He already had fish and bread cooking. How did he get the fish? Because he represents the eternal promise. So when you have the eternal promise, when you cast your net to the right, when you start striving for these eternal things, salvation, the word, being good to thy neighbor, loving God, all these things, those temporal promises are met. They'll be provided for, as we can see with the fish. Jesus is the eternal fish, right? The 153 fishes. The coin in his mouth, the coin in his mouth was provided for by the eternal fish. Okay? And then on another level too is that there's a workmanship connection to that. Right? When you live for this world and you do the hard work, yes, you get that temporal currency as well. But remember, on the coin too, regardless of who's on the coin, because I researched that as well, like who's on the coin. Was it Caesar? Because Jesus does have a verse in the Gospels: "Render to what Caesar, render to what God's," right? So therefore, was it a Caesar coin? Some people say it was a different coin. It was a coin of Tyre, right? But the coin of Tyre has a pagan god on it. So regardless, it means and symbolizes the same thing, those temporal things, right? The people who run this world right now are very temporal. They live in a temporal world. They live for today. They live for their houses, their cars, their nice things, their money. These things are temporal, and they will fade, and they will go away. And if you live for these things, these temporal things, you're going to end up with nothing, right? Eternally. But if you cast your net to the right, you live for these eternal things. And then those temporal things are provided for. Hence the coin in the fish's mouth. All right. Does it make any sense to you? Okay, again, so Jesus already had fish and bread at the campsite. Jesus is the eternal meat, the bread of life, and he's also the fish, and I'll explain that to you. Which I already did in 153 fishes. He's the narrow path, right? Between the two hemispheres, right here is the fish. All right, my computer's going crazy. It's doing all the thinking for me. So right here you have the 153 degrees between the two hemispheres. And you can see right here, you can see the fish, right? And that is the narrow path, the narrow way. Cast your net to the right. Okay. So Jesus even says that many times, if you're a theologian, even at an elementary level, he clearly says that he's the bread of life. And there's also verses of him saying that, that temporal bread will rot. I will last forever. So he's letting you know there's a difference between literal fish and literal bread versus eternal fish and eternal bread, right? And that's why you have a Peter connection, because Peter's always caught doing these temporal things. That's why he used Peter to go catch the temporal fish with a temporal coin in his mouth. All right. I think that's it on that. Here's let's see here. I don't know why I kept all these. Here's the coin that they think was the blood money, the shekel of Tyre. This is just a little fun fact that I'll observe with you. The silver tetradactyl, the silver shekel struck by the mint of Tyre, features prominently in several pivotal events in the life of Jesus of Nazareth. It's documented in the New Testament. It is likely to be the coin that Jesus told his disciple Simon Peter that he would find miraculously in the mouth of the fish. It was probably one of the coins that tumbled to the ground when Jesus overturned the tables of the money chambers in the temple of the courtyard. And perhaps most significant of all, it's believed to be the coin that Judas Iscariot received 30 of in exchange for betraying his master. I think it's probably a coin of Caesar on it, because the reason why is because Jesus clearly brought up Caesar before. But I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm not a coin enthusiast. By the time the ancient Phoenician port city of Tyre was conquered by the Macedonian king Alexander III the Great in 332 BC, it already acquired a reputation within the region for the quality of its silver coinage. Coins continued to be struck there under the authority of the Greek kings. When the Romans arrived in the eastern Mediterranean, they permitted the mint to strike an independent silver coinage from about 125 BC, compromising silver shekels weighing about 14 grams. Wow. The diderchim's half shekels weighing about 7 grams, which is a lot. That's pretty heavy for a coin, I think. With only minor exceptions, the design of the coin remained constant for nearly 2 centuries. Okay, so there you go. It was modeled on the shekel by their last Greek king, Demetrius II. It was executed near Tyre. In 125 BC, his portrait on the coin was replaced with the Tyre god Melkart, son of Baal. Even worse, right? Even worse than Caesar, the son of Baal. The reverse depicts an eagle with the palm branch over his shoulder and perched on the bow of the ship. The inscription can be translated Tyre, the holy and inviolable, inviolable. Sorry, my mind already automatically gravitates to the worst kind of volatile word. Together with the date of issue, which allows them to be dated accurately. Doom and gloom. Just kidding. Uh, Despite depicting the head of the pagan god and the graven image, both of which were deeply objectionable to neighboring Jews, the silver coin struck at Tyre became the only currency accepted by Jewish religious authorities to pay the annual temple tax. This is because it was struck in the purest silver available in the region. Wow, 95%, making it significantly more valuable than the Roman silver coins imported from the Far East that contain only about 80% silver. I wonder if they're saying that because it's that coin has more silver, therefore that would cover the tax of that time. But the temple tax was introduced by Moses, the lawgiver. Okay, we won't get into all that. Just a fun fact. But regardless, it has pagan gods on it, and it's the symbology of the same analogy that Jesus used. Render to what's Caesar's, right? Render to God's what's God's. Are you Caesar's? Who are you in the image of? Caesar? This world? Satan? Or are you in the image of God? All right. Upward and onward. Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. What it is and how it is celebrated. All right. Yom Kippur, 2024 begins at sundown Friday. October 11th, 2024, and ends at sundown on Saturday. October 12th, 2024. This is the holiest Jewish day and the most important 24-hour period. I giggle because they say that with every feast day, which they are. That's pretty cool. Known as the Day of Atonement, and the last of the 10 days of penitence, which are the 10 days of awe, which are between Rosh Hashanah and the Day of Atonement. Okay? The Day of Atonement. Yom means day in Hebrew, and Kippur means to atone. The Day of Atonement. Throughout the 10 days of awe, repentance leading up to Yom Kippur, those practicing Judaism have been reflecting on personal aspects of the past year, deciding how to improve, seeking forgiveness, and showing compassion to others. Traditionally, the belief is that after judging a person by their deeds over the last year, God decides who will be sealed in the book of life to live for another year or who will die. Okay, so us being Christians, we know that believing Jesus is our redemption and our repentance and all that stuff. So we don't have to be burdened by that. We're just clearly observing these solemn feast days, these to be in God's time, right? We're practicing God's holy days, but we don't have to be a slave to them. Again, we're just observing them. What I'm going to do personally, I'm just going to fast. Um, I don't I'm not trying to like repent. Um, in the sense of how the Jews are repenting. I repent to Jesus Christ and that's it, and to God the Father, of course, and the Holy Spirit. Um, I'm not going to worry about being in the. Once you believe on Jesus, you're in the book of life, right? That's how it's done. The Jews will eventually figure that out towards the end of the tribulation times. Yom Kippur traditions. There are many traditions associated with Yom Kippur. Here are 4 of them. Number 1, fasting from food and work. Feasts are replaced with fasting on this holiest of religious days. However, 2 traditional meals are enjoyed the day before the fast begins at sundown. Both meals begin by dipping round challah bread into honey, and is customary on Rosh Hashanah. At sundown, the soul is afflicted by 25 hours of fasting, no drinking or eating. Fasting enables followers to stop their normal routine to refocus on their attention to prayer and connecting spiritually with God. So I do that in the sense of the fasting aspect. Some traditions will say 24 hours, some will say 25. I don't know why. 25 hours kind of makes sense because it has the whole 7 thing connected to it, but I don't know. It's at your own discretion. Um, if you're an older person, I would definitely get advice from your doctor before doing any kind of fast, um, especially fasting from water. Water is very important, and definitely if you're diabetic and stuff like that, well, you have to eat and stuff. But you can observe it. You can still understand the meaning behind it, and you can still repent. You can still connect to God that day. And God knows our struggles, so if you have physical ailments that prohibit you from doing that, I'm sure God will shed some light on you. This is just like synchronizing our internal watches, to God's calendar and eliminating the old calendar, secularism, the bunny rabbit, right? We are detaching from that old world and living in God's new world. Because when Jesus does come back and reclaims the earth, we're going to be practicing these holy feast days. Sabbath days will be corrected. All that stuff will be corrected. Will they have their same meanings behind them? I don't know. It's going to be exciting to find out. Okay, attending synagogues and services. Um, I think as a Christian, just stay in the Word, right? There are several synagogue services throughout Yom Kippur, songs, religious customs, as well as prayers and readings from the Mashzor, a special prayer book, are recited. Portions of Deuteronomy are read in the morning services, and a selection from Leviticus and Genesis are read in the afternoon. The readings encourage those in attendance to live holy lives and draw closer to God. So there you go. So if you do have health issues that prohibit you from doing any fasting, well, there you go. Just read some Old Testament, stay in connection to God. The single long blowing of the shofar, the ram's horn, ends the holy day service and fasting. Live stream Yom Kippur services and programs. Okay. Wearing white. I didn't know that. It is a tradition for everyone to wear white clothing on Yom Kippur. I did not know that, and I've studied Yom Kippur several times already. The men often wear a kittel, a white robe-like garment on Yom Kippur. It is said to resemble angels. Us as Christians know that that kind of makes sense because in heaven we'll have our white robes. We're rewarded with the white robes. Just the righteousness and the faith of the saints. The high priest's garment and burial shroud. White reminds those attending services that they are to be like angels praising God. White also symbolizes the forgiveness and the spiritual cleansing that they're praying for. And that life on earth is temporal. Wow. Wow. White is worn with a humble awareness of one's need to repent sins and pray to God for forgiveness. They pray in hope, remembering how God forgave the children of Israel for their sins of idolatry during the days of Moses. Breaking the fast, break fast. Uh, at the conclusion of the last Yom Kippur service, many enjoy a festival meal at home with family and friends. The foods that are traditionally eaten vary, but are often baked with breakfast goods. Um, I eat, when you fast like this, you want like the worst foods, but I guess there's traditions behind specific foods. I don't go that route. I eat what I feel like when I'm done fasting. I'm just like, if I want a pizza, I'm eating a pizza. If I'm eating a burger, I'm eating a burger. If I want a burger, I want, Typically, we break the fast with a lighter meal: tuna fish, white fish, salad, blinzes, egg souffle, or bagels with cream cheese. It's like, oh, we're gonna starve you for 25 hours. We're gonna feed you a salad. Not happening. Sorry, God. I will fast, but I'm eating some junk food afterwards. We always break the fast with bagels and Nova, which bagels are delicious too, right? Everything bagel with strawberry cream cheese. Ugh. Always, when the Kings were younger, we went to a friend's home. They invited a ton of people and had the most amazing dairy spread. We've taken the tradition with us. Okay. Okay. Just as Yom Kippur is a day of fast and the day before Yom Kippur is set aside for eating, preparing for this holy day. There are many activities done before the fast, including eating a pre-fast meal, which is known as the Suda something meal of separation, and concluding meal. Lighting of candles, donating to charity, requesting, receiving honey cake, which provides blessings for a sweet year. Which kind of did that with Rosh Hashanah. Um, yeah, I think we kind of got a gist of it. I mean, if you want to radicalize it, you know, go for it. Um, I just like to keep a Christian aesthetic distance, a healthy distance from celebrating these feast days. I used to radicalize them and get all stressed out over it. And I'm like, wait, that's not the right feeling I should have. I shouldn't be stressed out, uh, trying to set up my tent that my dog destroys every 5 minutes, trying to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. I'm like, it's no longer fun. And then you're scared to death, especially if you live in the wilderness like I do. Um, so what I try to do is just I take a more humble approach, and there's a lot of little tree dwellings over here, and I like to spend a meal, or even I have like wooden carports that are very tabernacle like. Maybe not a carport, but like a porch port, and I have a meal out there, and I pray, and I do stuff like that for the tabernacles. I used to get stressed out about it. I used to build a tent and go out and all that, and I thought maybe God would punish me because if I didn't spend every waking moment that I'm supposed to be spending outside in that tent, that like it was a bad thing and I won't receive my salvation. And we know that's not true. Believing in Jesus Christ is our only salvation. What we're doing with these is we're just observing these as Christians, um, preparing ourselves for the new world to come, of course. I wouldn't get hung up on this kind of stuff. I just try to me personally, I try to get a good feeling of the feast day. If that means eating some of the certain foods that are required, yeah, I do. Or practicing some of the certain traditions, yeah, I do. Um, if you have the luxury of a fenced-in backyard and you like to go camping, do it for the tabernacles. Go camping all week. It's not frowned upon. It's what we're supposed to be doing. But if you don't have the luxury of that stuff, or if it's dangerous for your health, dangerous for your life, you got mountain lion in your region, like, I would just, go hang out under your carport, read some Torah, or, and have a meal and talk to God, for the week. I think that's sufficient. You're letting God know that you know what day it is. You know, it's it's all for the simple fact of just showing God that we know His feast days, and we're choosing His time, His holy days over the world's holy days. And I know also too that we have families, we have customs, but at the same time, we have to disconnect internally. Um, and yeah, that might create a distance between you and your family. Or I it was hard for me the first couple of years. Like, I don't celebrate Christmas anymore, guys. It's Christmas is a secular holiday. It's made up. Santa Claus is Satan. And trying to explain that to people at first, it can drive a wedge between you and your family. After a while, they accept it, or they leave. Right? These are the consequences that we have to take. We have to draw that line, stand up for God, but at the same time, we don't have to be slaves to these things. And that brings me to this verse over here. It kind of reminds me of it. Let's check this out. Suppose ye that I am come to give peace on earth, I tell you, nay, but rather division. For from henceforth there shall be five in one house divided, three against two, and two against three. The father shall be divided against the son against the father, the mother against the daughter against the mother-in-law against the daughter-in-law, and the daughter-in-law against the mother-in-law. I think we have glimpses of this division, right? Even from back then, because people who believed in Jesus were divided, right? The resurrection, the people who didn't believe the resurrection versus the people who do. But also, this echoes all the way down to us, because we can see the division of Christians being divided nowadays from the rest of the world. Um, Christian persecution, and this is only going to get worse for us, is prophesied. So if you are a believer, that you know what you're in for. Um, and we can see this division, and just like I explained, even with my own family, for a while it did divide us. For a while, I was ostracized as, you know, people would even like make fun of the fact that I'm doing stuff that's a little bit different than what they're accustomed to. But yet they would call themselves Catholics or Christians, or followers of the Bible, right? and yet they're celebrating Christmas. And then you ask people, well, where's Christmas at in the Bible? It's not even there. And then you start reading even deeper, and like Christ wasn't even born on December 25th. A lot of pagan gods were. I wonder if that has something to do with that, right? And then you start going deeper, and you realize, like, wait, the baby couldn't even been born in a manger at that time because it would have froze to death. And the shepherds were described as shepherding their flocks at that time. It would have been too cold in December. So that brings you to a different month. I'm not going to get into that. September. I'm not going to get into that. Somewhere around there. Um, I think it's unanimous throughout the truther in the Christian community that something along those lines with that time frame. Won't get into it, but at the same time, that's not found in the Bible. December 25th is not found in the Bible. Santa Claus is not found in the Bible. Right? Why is it that you can get Satan from Santa? It's just the irony of this stuff. And plus all the whole Saint Nick thing and the etymology of Saint Nick and how it's all overtoned with pagan gods and demonic gods as well, or demonic beings. Um, I think it's derived originally from Nimrod and so on and so forth. But anyways, um, and we don't know none of that stuff here in America. We don't really. We just, through heretical practices, meaning these generational habits that we do, that we share. We don't question anything. We don't question why we fire fireworks. Oh, it's for the great battle, for the war. You do some deeper studying on it, then you find out that it's a Sirius ritual, right? The star Sirius that flashes red, white, and blue. Um, and how that's all connected to ancient Egypt and all that stuff. The irony of the 4th of July is that 19 other countries or something like that. I'm pretty sure they use that weird number by the way when I research this stuff, that they celebrate their Independence Day at the exact same time. It was a country war. It wasn't a world war. So everybody, on the 4th of July just coincidentally had their freedom from the North or the South or for persecution of a different country. It wasn't a world war. It was an independent war. Well, I guess there was some connections to it, but there's a lot of other countries that had no connection to our War of Independence at that time that coincidentally celebrate their Independence Day. You can research that. And come the 4th of July, I'll look for all that information again and do a video on all that stuff. That was my first year around doing YouTube. Not this past 4th of July. I did a video on it before. Um, if I have any diehard fans out there, diehard viewers, if you can remember that. Anywho, same thing with, I don't know. I don't know. We just follow these same habitual things without questioning them, right? Just like your birthday, right? Blowing out the candle. Why do we do this without questioning it? Come to find out, when you do a little bit deeper searching, come to find out that it's there's a demonic undertone to it. It's blowing out the light, right? And then you're wishing on something. It's almost like it kind of reminds me of the whole secret, all that witchcraft and the whole belief system of the secret. How you go into a room, you light a candle, and you act out, and you manifest all your stuff. I believe it's called manifesting witchcraft or something like that. I heard some witch chick talk about it, and it's a thing, like, and then also blowing out the candle is blowing out the light, So these are the things that you can Google. You go down a couple rabbit holes and you'll find it. but we do things without even questioning them. And we have to question these things. And then when you start breaking down the etymology of these things, the origins of these rituals that we conduct, participate in, we find out that they're either pagan origin, just like Halloween, pagan origin, which is the opposite of God. Pagan is just anything but what God tells you to do. It's considered pagan. And that goes in concordance to secular time, right? The Antichrist. Anything that's not of Christ is considered an antithesis of Christ, which is the Antichrist. So same thing goes with paganism, is the antithesis of Christ, which is pretty much Satanism. Oh, but I don't worship Satan in particular. You celebrate Christmas, probably do. Anyways, but it's the opposite of Christ. It doesn't matter. That's what it comes down to. Paganism is antichrist. It's the antichrist spirit. It's the opposite of Christ, right? So there's no way around it. So when we celebrate these things unknowingly, that's what we're getting involved in. And we need to do our research. We need to study. We need to, watch videos like these and truthers and all them, like they're putting out real stuff. Got to wake up to it. Okay, so let's fact check the Independence Day thing. Uh, Independence Day around the world. Let's see here. July, it turns out, is a pretty popular month for independence. There are 25 countries that celebrate it in July. Wow. Second only to August 27th. So August, there's 27 in August. July, August. Perhaps there's something to hot months, since most of these countries are in the northern hemisphere, where July, August, and September, the third most within 23. Wow. Make up the summer months. So that's what I was referring to. It's a serial. It's a serial ritual. It's a serious, which is probably synonymous with cereal. It's a serious ritual that, as we studied before, that um, the Egyptians equated to the dog star, which is present in these hot summer months. And it's closest to the sun, I believe, and at that time, and they call it a second sun. And that would give explanation to why those 3 months were the hottest of the year, because of Sirius. And it's closest to our sun at that time, so they call it the second sun. Um, that's just the mythology of the Egyptian mythology. Um, it's the Sirius ritual, and Sirius also flashes red, white, and blue as well. So that's why you get the colors, you get the fireworks that seem to equate those colors. The same thing with the American flag, the whole Sirius thing, the 4th of July, Independence Day. It's all synonymous with Sirius. They call it the dog days of summer, right? Because they call Sirius the dog star. And that's just a quick little recap of that whole ritual. I'll get some factual, exactual information later on. Maybe I'll do it before July. Maybe I'll do it in a few weeks or something like that. I don't know. Leave a comment if you want me to do a study on that, which I probably won't receive a comment, but I'll still probably end up doing a deep dive on it anyways, just for a recap. That's the fun about erasing your first year's work, that you can do a recap on all the stuff that you already did. And most people probably won't even believe that you did it, but there's got to be at least a diehard viewer out there that watched all the first year stuff. It's funny too, like all that first year stuff was like, for me, it was all, you know, new information, And it was, a lot of it was like stuff I didn't compile it from other people. It was all straight from like the Holy Spirit. And I see people talking about it now, right? All that first year stuff, like, wow, like, um, like I brought up before, like Leah and Rachel, right, represented the Jews and the Gentiles, and I this year finally for the first time I heard people equating that together, putting that connection together. Um, and I even took it a step further, talking about, well, that's synonymous with Peter and John, John whom Jesus loved, and Jacob loved Rachel. Remember that? And Leah had, a lazy eye or something like that. So he didn't love her as much, but he still loved her. It was his wife. I'm joking around, of course, but about the lazy eye. But we did all those studies on that kind of stuff, and the same thing. It's synonymous with. It's in conjunction with John and Peter. John is the apostle whom Jesus loved, representing the Jews, and Peter represents the Gentiles, as he gave instruction and helped, co-conspired with Peter, the Gentile apostle, right, to spread the gospel message to the rest of the world, which therefore he's in connection to the Gentiles. And it makes sense too if you understand any form of the rapture, especially to pre-tribbers. This makes so much sense too, but which they don't use this yet. How when Jesus' body disappeared in the cave, and Mary told Peter and John, and they both ran, even though John made it to the cave first, Peter went in first. He got to the cave later, but went in first. Just like, the idea of the Gentiles and the Jews, right? The whole rapture idea. Anywho, but yeah, it's very fruitful to see people coming around to these facts, but it's also like heartbreaking the fact I didn't save any of that stuff. Like, oh, whatever. Live and we learn, right? But then again, that's the beauty of the whole thing. I get to talk about this stuff all over again. I get to clarify it. I get to refine it and make it even more fun. Um, and get better at explaining it. Because, man, if you've never done this kind of work, man, it's hard to explain to people. Um, deep, rich, things from the Bible, wisdom from the Bible. It's hard to explain ideas, especially when you're playing with ideas, and no one's ever talked about this kind of stuff, because you feel like a quack at first, and then you learn, over time to trust that Holy Spirit, and then you get verified through other people, and that's the sowing and reaping thing that I think Jesus talks about. Even though I sowed it, but I didn't get to reap it, but at the same time, it's very fruitful. You know, or I get to reap something that somebody else sowed. Right? It's very fruitful. And I do that too. I compile other people's idea. I talk about it all the time. I try to give a shout out to whoever was the source of the idea. I try to, as much as I can, without seeming like a crazy fan or something like that, a stab fan. I just try to give a source of where I got the information, and then I'll play with it to the point where it becomes something more or something different. And without that source, without that person planting that original seed, I wouldn't have been able to reap it and grow it into something even better or different, or to find a deeper truth or meaning to it. Anywho, I didn't expect to go further than the three topics I told you about in the beginning: Exodus 11, the Coinfish, and Yom Kippur. Um, but yeah, we took a little bit of a turn, but that's all I have for you today, and I'm not taking any more turns. So hopefully you got what you came for, and if you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section. If you want me to do a video about something, I'll do it. Just gotta respond. You gotta watch. Tell your friends. Tell your ma. All right, that's it. Bye.